What's the day today, Bob?
Today is day number 13. Day 13 aboard the cruise ship Koru. Which means we've been sailing for something over 12 days now since we left Horta in the Azores. And we still have 399 nautical miles to run to Cherbourg. So we've still got quite a long way to go. Yesterday we did 120 nautical miles on the GPS. We only actually made good about 105 towards our destination. Once again, squalls are hitting us, and they've been taking us off to the north. And every time she shears away and struggles to get back, we're losing ground to the north. So given that she was doing that pretty relentlessly over the past 24 hours, apart from one patch in the middle of the night where we lost the wind completely, it's no surprise that we lost some distance off of our direct line course. So the wind was so strong during the night, it just completely blew away my beard. It's just gone. Oh my God! And my beautiful wife tells me I look at least 10 years younger, and I love her to bits for that. I hope she's right. The decided to take off the beard makes me look a little bit tired. I wouldn't say older than I really am, but it certainly makes me look tired. And I guess I'd probably still look a little bit tired, but that's okay. So how are we doing on our planning speed? We've spoken a lot over these vlogs about what we're doing day by day, and I've said before that we have a planning speed of about 100 nautical miles a day. Well, over the distance that we've done over the ground, which is about 1100 nautical miles so far, we're about 2 days down on our planning speed of 100 miles a day in terms of the direct line course. This is a journey that should have taken about, in terms of the nautical miles, about 13 days. So we're coming up to the point now when we should be almost arriving in terms of the direct line distance. But in terms of the actual, what we've done over the ground, sort of a lazy S-shape kind of course, 1,100 nautical miles, this is 12 days of sailing. So we've probably covered about 90 or just a little bit more than 90 miles a day. So we're a little bit down on our planning speed, and some of that is to do with the weather, some of it is to do with being short-handed. It's very difficult to steer a boat and maintain an effective course when you are short-handed, even if you do have an autopilot or a wind vane. We don't have an autopilot, we have a wind vane. So, you know, a little bit disappointing, but that's okay. It's certainly been a little bit rough. The weather people told us that we embraced very briefly a couple of days ago storm conditions, and we just kept on sailing. Didn't even realise the wind was that strong, but evidently it was 50, 60 miles an hour, sustained winds at times over the wind shear, and probably gusting a little bit more than that. So no wonder she was going over a little bit on her ear. So right at this very moment, we're about 2 miles away from the beginning of the continental shelf of Europe. And this is where the sea comes from a depth of about 2,500 metres up to a depth of about 400 metres, 300 metres. And where you have a very, very big blow here, it's from this point forward that you get these very large seas building into the western approaches, where we don't have a very large blow. So therefore we're not going to get that heaping up of seas. But the whole of the edge of the continental shelf, about every 150 miles, has a buoy, a very large buoy. Those buoys, they monitor the heights of the waves and various other oceanographic details. And we're passing, right at this very moment, we're passing about 20 miles south of one of those buoys. So that's where we are. We're coming on to the European continental shelf. Great, just under 400 nautical miles to go to Cherbourg. What have been the challenges? I thought I'd speak very briefly about the challenges of ocean sailing. So one of the biggest challenges on the boat is the movement, and you can see at the moment that I'm moving like this. Very difficult for the camera to get an impression of just how dynamic the movement is inside a yacht. Well, she's actually throwing herself around all over the place, and it's not tremendously rough at the moment. So how you control yourself and and the ergonomics of the boat in terms of what you keep bumping into and banging your head on and banging your back on. It really is one of the biggest challenges, and the movement of the yacht impacts everything, and it slows everything down. When you're trying to cook, you have to be extremely careful, extremely slow. Only do one thing at a time. If you try sort of using two hands to do something, as sure as heck it will go flying, or something will hit you in the face or whatever. When you're just making a simple cup of tea, putting a tea bag in a cup and pouring in the boiling hot water and then a little bit of milk and stirring it and then handing it across to your mate or the skipper or whatever, it's all very, very challenging. And I think for people that just do a little bit of coastal cruising and they don't come off onto the ocean and do these long passages, the thing about it is these long passages, they can be relentless, and if the weather's loppy for virtually the whole thing, as it has been for a lot of this passage from the Azores, it can become very wearing. It becomes very tiring. So another problem is, well, hygiene. Phew. Keeping yourself clean is actually, it's quite difficult, and I think my strongest recommendation would be have lots of t-shirts, have stacks of underwear, stacks of socks, plenty of changes of clothes, so you can just every day or every other day or whatever, just completely change your clothes and have a new set to put on. Trying to keep yourself clean is great in the tropics. You can stand on deck, it's lovely calm weather, take buckets of water over yourself, have a good old scrub. But in this type of environment it's much more difficult, and we only have a very, very tiny head and we don't have a shower in there. So it's very difficult. Baby wipes, great piece of kit. Wet wipes, baby wipes. You can use it for all your various regions, between your toes, wherever. Let your imagination take this away. But they're actually a great piece of kit to have. Little bird baths of just using a very small little bit of water, and just you can actually be quite effective with that. But nevertheless, the movement of the boat still impacts everything. It's very, very difficult to do the most basic things. Even just sat down on the head there on the toilet, trying to do what you got to do can be a heck of a challenge. So you shouldn't underestimate that. Another big problem is storage. Where you put things. We have a whole bunch of tins in these lockers, but on the port side, these lockers. Well, of course, with the boat, she's actually heeled over towards me at the moment. She's heeled over to starboard like this most of the time, and then going backwards and forwards. And if you dare to open one of those lockers with all our tins nicely placed in there, you'll get a confetti of tins bouncing off of your head and hitting the far side of the boat. So you've got to be very, very careful about this. It's quite a challenge just to get one of those tins out of the locker, and maybe we do it a little bit different next time. I can tell you that if you have lockers like that, a great thing to have just inside the locker is going to be some netting with a bit of bungee cord along the top of it, so the netting just holds everything in place even if you've got the locker door open, and then you can go in there and rummage around behind the netting. It's one way of doing it. No doubt there are other ways. Cooking, obviously that's going to be a problem. We've already spoken about that. And I think the other two ones are to do with how you get along with your crew, how long you get on with your first mate, or you get along with your skipper. You have to be very accommodating of each other, and I think that's probably a fairly obvious problem. If you've got a lot of people on a small boat like this, 6 people, it becomes a heck of a problem. And the other problem is weather, and how that impacts you in terms of the dynamics on the boat, and how it impacts your psychology, whether you're overwhelmed by it, scared by it, uncertain of your level of skill, uncertain of the boat itself. That would probably be the great uncertainty of this boat, because she's only ever a couple of times been through bad weather, and only for a very short period. And here we are in the middle of the North Atlantic at a time of year when you really probably shouldn't be doing this passage. At least it's a marginal season, to say the least. And we have had some bad weather. We certainly had gale and very briefly storm force winds. So the weather impacts the movement of the boat, the weather impacts your safety, of course, got to be very careful, and weather impacts your psychology. So, having spoken about the problems, what are the rewards? Okay, that's another program. What are the rewards? It's quite difficult. Some of the rewards are a little bit esoteric, you know, character building and all of that good old stuff, you know. But I think probably one of the biggest rewards is just realising that accommodation you have to have with your crew on board here, particularly if the crew happens to be your wife or your husband, your significant other. It reinforces just how much you care about them, or it should do, because you have a responsibility to each other. In this case, Nikki has a responsibility towards me. She loves me, and she clearly sees that I'm the guy with most of the sailing experience, and so she supports me absolutely to the best of her ability, so that I can get on with the sailing and doing the manly stuff when it needs to be done. And then of course I have a responsibility to her, and I think the rewards are that it reinforces, for me anyway, just how much you care for each other and how much you love each other. So there you go. And on that note, here we are, 400 miles still to go. This is my little navigation station, by the way. It's very, very nice. And on here I've been plotting the chart positions. Maybe I'll run a camera over the chart at some stage and you'll be able to see what we've been doing. And Mr. Bigglesworth has his head stuffed into a sleeping bag just over there. It's very, very funny. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye. Ocean crossings, and I know a lot of people that watch these vlogs will have done this type of thing before, but I'm also guessing that some people, a little bit just fell off the camera. So that brings me on to the first of the challenges. Excuse me while I pick this up. Film the top of my bald head. Something fell off the camera, there you go. It's not needed, so